I cannot see them, but each cough is a stab to my blind heart. Where is hope in this stone labyrinth, while fever devours my granddaughters? Elias, an elderly widower, fumbled along the cold walls of an ancient monastery's ruins, his sharpened ears straining to catch any sound other than the faint cries of the little girls, Livia and Sophia, burning with relentless fever. Driven from their land, they had found refuge deep within that forgotten place, a monument to hopelessness where the icy wind hissed dark legends. But with each uncertain step, each stumble, Elias felt a presence, a secret slumbering beneath the dust and oblivion. And what he discovered in the shadows of that monastery forever changed the meaning of sight. The slumbering secret seemed to whisper to Elias through the cracks of time, a silent call that only his afflicted heart could hear. With hands calloused by life and pain, he groped the cold stones, each explored inch a prayer, a thread of hope amidst the darkness that enveloped him. His other senses, sharpened by the absence of sight, were his guides in that labyrinth of forgotten memories. The smell of mold and damp earth, the distant echo of a drip, the whisper of the wind that now began to transform into a stronger lament, everything was information for the old man. With each uncertain step, the image of Livia and Sophia, small and defenseless, burning with fever, tightened his chest. He could not see them, but their faint moans and the gasping breaths that reached his ears were clearer than any sight. The little girls, his only stars in this sky of trials, were fading. Elias knelt, his forehead pressed against the icy stone, and a silent sob escaped his throat. "Please, my God," he murmured, his voice choked with emotion, "give me a sign, give me a chance to save them." Outside, the brewing storm began to unleash its fury. Heavy raindrops lashed against the cracked walls of the monastery, and the wind howled like a hungry wolf, threatening to bring down what remained of those ruins. The intense cold penetrated Elias's thin clothes, but he barely felt it. His mind was fixed on his granddaughters, on the urgency of finding something, anything, that could alleviate their suffering. He stood up, determined, and continued to explore, his hands moving with an almost desperate precision. He passed through crumbling arches, feeling the rough texture of mosses and lichens that covered the stones. Suddenly his fingers found an area where the stone felt smoother, almost polished, unlike the rest. There was an indentation, a small unevenness that didn't fit the natural irregularity of the ruins. Curious, Elias pressed the spot harder. Nothing. He groped around, searching for a lever or mechanism, but found none. Frustration threatened to overwhelm him, but the image of his sick granddaughters spurred him on. With a sigh, he pressed his ear against the wall, trying to catch any hollow sound, any hint of an empty space. The noise of the rain and wind made it difficult, but he remained still, focused. Then a clap of thunder made the ruins tremble. In the next instant, Elias felt the wall under his hands give way slightly, as if a part of it had shifted with the vibration. He groped the area he had pressed again, and this time felt a small click. With a firmer push, a segment of the wall gently rotated inward, revealing a narrow, dark passage from which fresher, damp air escaped, carrying a subtle aroma of earth and something more. Something green and alive. His eyes could not see, but his heart felt the promise. His eyes could not see, but his heart felt the promise. With an outstretched hand, Elias advanced cautiously through the narrow passage. The air inside was denser, humid, and carried an earthy aroma mixed with something he couldn't identify, yet it felt fresh and ancient at the same time. The darkness was absolute, but for him, who had lived in it for so long, it was merely an extension of his world. Each step was measured, his bare feet feeling the uneven stone floor, covered by a thin layer of soft moss. The storm outside, which had previously seemed to swallow the world, was now a distant murmur, muffled by the monastery's thick walls. He groped the walls as he advanced, feeling the cold, smooth stones, different from the rough, cracked ones outside. There was a sense of care there, as if that place had been preserved, hidden from time and the fury of the elements. Elias's heart beat with a mixture of apprehension and a growing, almost palpable hope. He thought of Livia and Sophia, their pale faces and feverish bodies, and this image propelled him forward, giving him a strength he didn't know he still possessed. With each meter, the urgency to find something that could save them intensified. Suddenly, a soft, constant sound, like a silken whisper, reached his ears. It was the sound of water, a rhythmic dripping that transformed into a small stream. Elias stopped, his senses sharpened, and followed the sound. The passage opened slightly into a small chamber, where the air became even fresher and purer. He stretched out his hand and felt the humidity in the air. Then his fingers touched a rocky surface covered by a thin layer of water. He knelt, and his calloused hands plunged into a small, natural basin carved into the stone. The water was incredibly cold, almost icy, and had a purity he had never felt before. There was no smell of mold or earth, only a clean, vital essence. A shiver ran through his body, not from cold but from a profound emotion. He brought some of the water to his lips. It was the purest and most refreshing he had ever tasted, with an almost sweet flavor that seemed to invigorate every cell of his being. Elias felt an unwavering certainty. This was the water the diary spoke of, the water with healing properties. His eyes could not see its glow, but his heart perceived it. With his hands still wet, he groped around the basin. His fingers found what felt like a small niche in the wall. Inside it, there was a rectangular, dusty object. Carefully, he pulled it out. It was a book bound in ancient leather with dry, fragile pages. Beside the book, there was a small cloth bag tied with a string. Upon opening it, Elias felt the texture of small packets of dried herbs and the shape of some vials. It was the botanical monk's diary and the supplies. A wave of relief and gratitude washed over him, making him kneel again. But this time, the tears streaming down his blind face were tears of hope. He had found the miracle. Now, he needed to return to his granddaughters. With trembling hands, Elias rose from the cold stone, holding the diary under one arm and the bag of herbs and vials in the other. The healing water was urgent. Carefully, he dipped a vial into the natural basin, feeling the icy water fill the container. Every movement was a silent prayer. The darkness of the secret passage, which had guided him, seemed like a tunnel of light, a bridge between despair and salvation. The earthy, fresh aroma of the chamber was now the scent of hope. He returned, his bare feet finding the way back with familiarity. With each step, the image of Livia and Sophia, pale and fragile, burning with fever, propelled him forward. The storm outside still roared, but the sound seemed more distant. Elias's heart beat strongly, a rhythm of urgency and faith. He felt the weight of the diary, not as a burden, but as a treasure, the wisdom of a botanical monk that transcended time, offering life to his granddaughters. Upon emerging from the secret passage, the air of the main monastery felt colder and denser, laden with damp stone and the echo of the wind. Elias quickened his pace, guided by the faint sound of the girls' breathing. He found them where he had left them, huddled under a blanket, their small bodies trembling. The fever seemed to have intensified, their moans almost inaudible. A pang of panic pierced through the relief, but he repelled it with determination. He knelt beside Livia first, his heart heavy. He felt the girl's forehead, burning hot. Delicately, he opened the vial of water, and with his fingertips moistened Livia's parched lips. "Drink, my flower," he whispered, his voice choked with emotion. The girl swallowed with difficulty a gasp, but the water went down. He repeated the process with Sophia, who reacted with an even fainter moan, but also managed to drink a little. Next, Elias opened the cloth bag. His experienced fingers groped the packets, feeling the texture of the dried herbs. Although he couldn't read the diary, the certainty that the right herbs were there, along with the water, was a beacon. In a small stone bowl he had found earlier, he crumbled one of the packets, feeling the pungent aroma of dried leaves. He mixed them with a little of the healing water, forming a paste. With extreme care, he applied a small portion to Livia's and Sophia's lips, hoping for the essence to be absorbed. The following minutes were an eternity. Elias remained kneeling, his hands on his granddaughter's feverish foreheads, listening to every breath, every movement. He prayed, not with words, but with the intensity of his love. The storm outside seemed to mirror the tempest in his chest. Gradually, almost imperceptibly, he felt a change. Livia's breathing became softer, less labored. Sophia let out a deeper sigh, and the tension in her small muscles seemed to lessen. Elias felt their foreheads again. The heat was still intense, but perhaps a little less scorching. A minimal change, almost imperceptible to anyone not so attuned to the girls' hearts, but for Elias it was a sign, a confirmation. The tears, once of despair, were now of fragile but real hope. Streaming down his marked face, the miracle had begun. The ruins, once a somber refuge, were now the stage for a fight for life, where the true vision of a blind grandfather guided the way. He needed to continue, with every drop, every leaf, every prayer. Elias remained kneeling, his heart beating a rhythm of hope and fear. The heat on Livia's and Sophia's foreheads, though still high, seemed to have receded a millimeter, a change so subtle that only the deepest love could perceive it. Livia's breathing sounded less labored, and a faint sigh from Sophia, almost inaudible, brought a relief that made Elias's legs tremble. It wasn't a complete cure, but it was a sign, a thread of light in the darkness that enveloped him. He knew the struggle was far from over, but the seed of the miracle had germinated. Carefully, he groped for the diary that lay beside him. The ancestral wisdom of the botanical monk, preserved in those pages, was the next step. But how could a blind man decipher the secrets of a book? The question weighed on his mind, a new obstacle in his journey. He couldn't read the letters, but he could feel. His calloused, sensitive fingers were his eyes. With a sigh of determination, he opened the book. The pages were rough and dry, with the unmistakable scent of ancient paper and earth. Elias turned them slowly, feeling each texture. On some, his fingers found small embossments, as if something had been pressed there long ago. He brought a page to his nose and inhaled deeply. A faint aroma of dried herbs, different from the general smell of the monastery, lingered in the air. It was a scent of life, of healing. He realized that the monk, perhaps foreseeing that someone without sight might need his wisdom, had left more than words there. With patience, Elias explored. On one of the pages, his fingers found the delicate shape of a dried leaf, almost pulverized, but still recognizable. On another, small, thin stems. He remembered the bag of herbs he had found. Could it be that the monk had pressed samples of the plants onto the pages as a tactile and olfactory guide? The idea ignited a new flame of hope in his chest. He wouldn't read, but he would feel and smell the wisdom. He picked up the cloth bag again and with his fingers groped the small packets. There was one that seemed to contain leaves similar to those he had felt in the diary, with a stronger, earthier aroma. Based on this reading by his senses, Elias decided that this would be the next herb to use. He crumbled a little more into the stone bowl, mixing it with the healing water from the spring. The paste that formed was thicker, and the scent, now more concentrated, seemed to promise relief. With the same delicacy as before, he applied the new paste to Livia's and Sophia's lips, ensuring a small portion was absorbed. He also moistened the girl's lips again with the miraculous water, observing every movement, every breath. The storm outside, which had previously roared with fury, now seemed to calm, its thunder more distant, the wind less biting. The minutes stretched on, filled with Elias's anxiety and unwavering faith. He felt his granddaughter's foreheads again. The heat was still present, but the sensation was of an ember diminishing, not a fire consuming. Livia let out a longer, deeper sigh, and Sophia, with an almost imperceptible movement, turned her head, nestling deeper into the blanket. Elias felt a fragile smile emerge on his lips. The miracle was unfolding, drop by drop, leaf by leaf, guided by the vision of a blind grandfather's heart and the silent wisdom of a forgotten monk. The night was still long, but the darkness no longer seemed so absolute. The night was still long, but the darkness no longer seemed so absolute. Elias, exhausted but with his spirit kindled by new hope, continued his vigil. His fingers, now more confident, returned to feel his granddaughter's foreheads. The heat, though persistent, was no longer the devouring fire that had made him tremble with dread. It was a milder warmth, like embers slowly dying out, promising the end of a terrible night. Livia and Sophia, still asleep, seemed more peaceful. Their breathing was more regular, and the faint moans had ceased, replaced by a silence that for Elias was the sweetest of melodies. With each moment of improvement, gratitude filled the old man's chest. He thought of the unknown monk who, centuries before, had dedicated his life to cataloguing the wisdom of plants, leaving a legacy that was now saving his granddaughters. An invisible yet powerful connection united past and present, the wisdom of a man who saw with his eyes and the faith of another who saw with his heart. The monastery, once a labyrinth of cold stones and forgotten memories, revealed itself as a sanctuary of life, a testament to the resilience of the human spirit. Elias knew he couldn't let his guard down. The fever was treacherous, and recovery a slow and uncertain path. He needed more herbs, more healing water. With renewed vigor, he leaned over the diary. His fingers explored the pages with renewed attention, searching for new textures, new aromas. On one of them, he felt the shape of small, dried flowers, with a sweet and earthy scent that reminded him of a blooming field under the sun. It was different from the previous herbs, softer, and he intuited that perhaps it was to strengthen, to nourish the small, weakened bodies. He found the corresponding packet in the cloth bag. Carefully, he crumbled the small flowers into the stone bowl, mixing them with the pure water from the spring. The paste that formed was delicate, and the aroma spread through the air, bringing a sense of calm. With his fingertips, Elias applied the new mixture to the girl's lips, moistening them again with the water. His gestures were full of tenderness, each touch a caress, each application a prayer. As he waited, he felt time pass in a different way. The storm outside had completely ceased. The air inside the monastery, which had previously been heavy and damp, now felt lighter, more breathable. A deep silence settled, broken only by the soft sound of his granddaughter's breathing and the distant dripping of the secret spring. Elias closed his eyes, though it made no difference to him, and bowed his head, listening. Suddenly, a movement. Livia, with a small moan, turned in the blanket, opening her eyes for a brief instant. They were blurry, but there was a glimmer of consciousness there. She groped the air, and her small fingers found her grandfather's calloused hand. Elias felt the touch, and a shock of joy ran through his body. He squeezed the small hand delicately. "Livia, my flower," he whispered, his voice choked with emotion. "You are here, my love. Grandpa is here." Sophia also stirred, a stronger sigh, and Elias felt her forehead. The heat had diminished even further. Now it was just a remnant of the fever that had consumed her. He brought his hand to his face and felt warm tears stream down his cheeks. They were not tears of sadness, but of overwhelming gratitude, of a relief that seemed to dissolve years of pain and despair. The miracle was happening before his other senses, a rebirth amidst the ruins. He knew the journey was still long, that the girl's weakness was profound, but the light had arrived. The monastery, with its secrets and its wisdom, was no longer a temporary refuge, but a home of healing and hope. Elias, the blind grandfather, had found the most important sight of all, the ability to see life flourish where before there had only been darkness, guided by his unwavering love for his granddaughters. Dawn, though still invisible to his eyes, was already breaking in his heart. Dawn, though still invisible to his eyes, was already breaking in his heart. Elias felt the cold morning air invade the ruins, bringing with it the damp scent of earth and a freshness that promised a new and bright day. Livia and Sophia slept a deeper, more peaceful sleep, their small bodies less tense, their breathing soft and regular. The blind grandfather felt his granddaughters' foreheads again, and a genuine smile, long absent, bloomed on his marked lips. The fever's heat had considerably diminished, transforming into a mild, almost normal warmth. Their small hands, which had once burned, were now merely warm. Exhaustion still weighed on him, but the joy of seeing them better was a balm for his weary soul. With the delicacy of one handling a treasure, Elias picked up the botanical monk's diary. His fingers explored the pages, seeking the next guidance. He felt the texture of the paper, the embossment of some pressed leaf, the subtle aroma each page exuded. It was as if the monk, across time, was whispering his secrets directly into his soul. He found a section where the pages were thicker, and under his fingers he felt a series of embossed drawings, as if they were maps or diagrams. They weren't just herbs, they seemed to be structures, paths. The scent there was different, a mixture of fertile earth and something reminiscent of old wood, but also a touch of freshness, as if life resided there. Curious, Elias groped deeper. On one of the pages, his fingers found a small cavity where something was kept. Carefully, he pulled it out. It was a small, dry seed, wrapped in a piece of fabric. Beside it, there was an embossed drawing of a robust plant with deep roots and vibrant flowers, and a small text in Braille, which Elias, with his sharpened sensitivity, managed to decipher. They weren't common words, but symbols. He realized that the monk had created his own system for recording crucial information. The message, translated by his senses, spoke of a hidden garden, the heart of the monastery, where life flourishes to nourish body and spirit. A shiver ran through Elias. A garden, hidden. He had imagined that the monk merely collected herbs in nature, but the idea of a cultivated garden within the ruins was something entirely new, a true turning point in his understanding of the place. The diary was not just a guide to healing, but a map to a new existence, an invitation to go beyond mere survival. The seed in his hand seemed to pulse with a silent energy, promising not just sustenance, but a purpose. He leaned over his granddaughters, their faces asleep and serene. Their healing was the first miracle, but perhaps the monk had a larger plan. If there was a garden, there would be more than just medicinal herbs. There would be food, sustenance. And the message about nourishing body and spirit suggested that the monastery could be a place of refuge and hope for others too, just as it had been for him and his granddaughters. The responsibility of unraveling this secret and perhaps continuing the monk's legacy weighed on his shoulders, but it was a weight he embraced with renewed strength. Elias stood up, the seed firmly held in his hand. His feet guided him out of the secret chamber, back to the main monastery. The sun began to filter through the cracks in the ruins, painting the stones in golden and grey hues. He knew that the path to finding this garden would be challenging, a labyrinth of stones and memories, but now he had a new vision, guided not only by love, but by a greater purpose. The monastery, once a refuge of despair, was transforming into a beacon of hope, a place where life somehow always found a way to flourish. Elias moved with the seed firmly held in his hand, a small treasure that promised a future. The sun, now filtering more intensely through the monastery's cracks, lightly warmed the stones, but did not dispel the gloom of the deeper corridors. He knew that his granddaughters, though better, were still fragile. The thought of leaving them alone, even for a brief period, tightened his heart. But the vision of the garden, the promise of sustenance and a true home, one that would nourish not only the body but also the spirit, was an irresistible call. The responsibility of unraveling the monk's legacy was now his. A weight he carried with honor. He returned to where Livia and Sophia slept, their serene faces beneath the blanket. He knelt beside them, feeling the mild warmth of their foreheads, a relief that warmed his own soul and chased away the shadows of the past night. "Grandpa will be back, my flowers," he whispered, his voice hoarse with emotion, though he knew they wouldn't hear him. It was more for himself, a solemn promise. He picked up the diary again, his sensitive fingers seeking the embossments of the map section. With each touch, a mental image formed, a labyrinth of corridors and courtyards, with a central point that seemed to be the heart of the monastery. The scent of fertile earth and ancient wood, which he had felt on the pages, seemed to emanate from that point, guiding him like an invisible beacon. The journey began. Elias stood up, the seed in his pocket, the diary under his arm, a map only he could read. His bare feet felt the unevenness of the ground, the loose stones, the broken steps that rose like silent traps. He groped the walls, seeking continuity, the direction the diary seemed to indicate with its embossments and aromas. The monk had left more than a visual map. He had left a tactile and olfactory map, a guide for those who, like Elias, saw with their hands, nose, and heart. He advanced slowly, each step a cautious exploration, each touch a reading. The monastery was vast, a tangle of ruins that stretched in all directions, a labyrinth of stone and shadow. The echo of his own footsteps was the only sound, besides the wind whistling through the openings and the distant dripping of the secret spring, a constant reminder of the life that pulsed there. Suddenly, his fingers found a different wall. It wasn't the cold, smooth stone of the main corridors, nor the roughness of the outer ruins he knew so well. It was a smoother surface, with a slight embossment, as if there had once been a door or gate sealed by time and oblivion. He remembered a drawing in the diary that showed a discreet, almost hidden entrance, camouflaged within the structure. With his hands, Elias explored every inch of that wall, searching for a crack, a crevice, any indication of a hidden passage. Frustration threatened to rise, a knot in his throat, but he repelled it with the strength of his determination. The monk wouldn't have left a map without an accessible path. He concentrated, closing the eyes that did not see, opening the senses that guided him with surprising clarity. The scent of fertile earth seemed stronger there, a silent and insistent invitation. He groped again, and this time, his fingers found a small indentation, a point where the stone seemed to yield slightly under pressure. With all the strength he had left, Elias pushed. A dry, heavy creak echoed through the ruins, a sound of centuries unraveling, and a section of the wall moved, revealing a narrow, dark opening. The air that came from within was fresher, laden with an unmistakable aroma of wet earth, green leaves, and exuberant plant life. It was, without a doubt, the scent of the hidden garden. A wide smile full of pure joy and relief illuminated Elias's tired, marked face. He had found it. His heart beat strongly, no longer from fear or despair, but from an overwhelming emotion, a profound gratitude that made him bow his head. He turned for an instant, as if he could see his granddaughters, and whispered, "I did it, my flowers. I did it. Hope, which had once been a fragile flame, now burned with full force, promising a new dawn for all of them. He knew that the path would still be long, that the garden would need care and arduous work to flourish fully, but the first and most difficult part of the journey had been accomplished. With a last glance in the direction where the girl slept, a gesture of love and promise, Elias bent down and entered the dark passage, guided by the aroma of life and the promise of a future. Elias took a hesitant step into the dark passage, the fresh, damp air enveloping him like an embrace. The scent of wet earth and exuberant plant life was intoxicating, much more intense than he had felt on the diary's pages. His bare feet touched a soft floor, covered by a layer of leaves and moss, a welcome contrast to the cold stones of the monastery. He stretched out his hands, groping the walls. They were stone, but covered by creeping vegetation, damp and alive. The sound of running water, once a distant drip, had now become a soft murmur, an invitation to move forward. He advanced cautiously, each touch a revelation. The corridor was narrow, but soon opened into a larger space. Elias felt the ceiling rise and the air became denser, saturated with aromas. There was the sweet scent of flowers, the earthy smell of roots, and the freshness of green leaves. He stopped, inhaling deeply, trying to absorb every detail of that hidden sanctuary. It was as if the monastery, which had once seemed dead, was pulsing with a secret, vibrant life. His fingers groped forward, and he felt the presence of plants. They were shrubs and climbers, some with broad, soft leaves, others with firmer stems. Amidst them, he distinguished the sound of small birds, a soft and melodious song that filled the space with unexpected magic. The hidden garden was not just an herb bed, it was a living ecosystem, a refuge of nature. Elias knelt, letting his hands explore the soil. It was rich, fertile, and he felt the moisture that nourished that profusion of life. His fingers found strong roots and tender shoots, the promise of future harvests. He remembered the seed he kept in his pocket, the symbol of a new beginning. The monk had not only healed, he had cultivated. With the eyes of his heart, Elias visualized the garden. He imagined the vibrant colors of the flowers, the deep green of the leaves, the sparkle of the water that flowed there. He felt the light even if he didn't see it, a light that nourished everything, perhaps filtered through some secret opening in the monastery's ceiling. It was a place of abundance, of peace, a true hidden paradise. Emotion overwhelmed him. Warm tears streamed down his face, not from sadness, but from a gratitude so intense it almost took his breath away. His granddaughters, Livia and Sophia, they would not only be healed, but would have a home, a place where they could grow, nourished by this generous earth and ancestral wisdom. The monastery, once a refuge of despair, was now the promise of a full life. He stood up, his mind buzzing with plans. He needed to return to the girls, ensure they were safe and comfortable. But he knew his work here was just beginning. The garden, though exuberant, would need care, organization. He would have to learn to cultivate it, to identify the plants, to harvest its fruits and herbs. It would be an immense challenge for a blind man, but the vision of his healthy granddaughters was the engine that propelled his soul and his will. Elias groped his way back, his steps now firmer, guided by a renewed purpose. The seed in his pocket seemed to vibrate with the same energy as the garden. He couldn't see the sun rise, but he felt the warmth of a new day in his heart. The monastery was no longer just the end of a journey, but the beginning of another, more promising one. He would return to Livia and Sophia, and together they would make that forgotten place a flourishing home, a testament to love, resilience, and the human capacity to find light, even in the deepest darkness. The monk's legacy would be continued, not with eyes, but with the heart and calloused hands of a grandfather. Elias groped his way back, his steps now firmer, guided by a renewed purpose that vibrated in every fiber of his being. The scent of the garden, an intoxicating mixture of wet earth and plant life, still lingered in his nostrils, a living promise that propelled him forward. As he approached the secret chamber where Livia and Sophia rested, his heart, once tight with anguish, now beat with a melody of hope. He entered the shelter with the delicacy of a whisper, fearing to disturb their sleep, which now seemed so precious. The gloom of the place was familiar, and the soft sound of his granddaughter's breathing was the sweetest of melodies, a balm for his weary soul. He knelt beside them, extending a trembling hand to touch Livia's forehead, a gesture laden with love and apprehension. The fever's heat had almost completely disappeared, replaced by a normal, soft, and comforting temperature. A deep sigh of relief escaped his lips, and a fragile but genuine smile bloomed on his life-marked face. He felt Sophia's forehead, finding the same miraculous improvement. Their small faces, once pale and sweaty, seemed more relaxed, and a faint, healthy blush began to color their cheeks. Elias felt a lump in his throat, an overwhelming mixture of profound gratitude and tears he could no longer hold back. They streamed warmly down his cheeks, washing away years of pain and despair. He leaned in and kissed both their foreheads, a gesture of unconditional love that expressed his entire soul. "My flowers, my little flowers," he murmured, his voice choked with emotion. "You are well. Grandpa has found a place for us." The seed, still in his pocket, seemed to burn with a silent energy, reminding him of the task ahead. The garden was a blessing, but also an immense challenge. As a blind man, he would have to learn to cultivate it, to identify plants by touch and smell, to organize the space with the precision of a craftsman. The mental image of the botanical monk, with his wisdom and patience, inspired him, giving him the strength to face the unknown. He picked up the diary again, his fingers tracing the pages with the embossments of the garden map. There was more to be discovered, more to be learned. The monk had left not only a healing guide, but a survival manual, a legacy of life that extended far beyond medicinal herbs. While Elias was immersed in his thoughts and plans, Livia stirred. A small moan escaped her lips, and she slowly opened her eyes. They were still a little blurry, but there was a glimmer of recognition in them, a glimpse of consciousness that made Elias's heart leap. She stretched out her small hand and groped the air, searching. Elias took her hand, squeezing it gently, feeling the fragility of that touch. "Grandpa is here, my love," he said, a wide and tender smile on his face. Livia tried to speak, but only a faint whisper came out. "Water," she managed to say, her voice hoarse, almost inaudible. Elias felt a shock of joy that ran through him from head to toe. She was conscious, she was asking. He took the stone bowl with the spring water and carefully brought it to his granddaughter's lips. Livia drank small sips, and Elias felt strength returning to her, even if slowly, like a stream that begins to flow again. Sophia also began to stir, and soon asked for water. An almost identical murmur. The recovery was underway, a miracle unfolding before his senses. With his granddaughters more stable, Elias felt a new wave of energy, a vigor he hadn't experienced in a long time. The monastery was no longer a temporary refuge, but the foundation of a new beginning, a home he would build with his own hands. He needed to organize the garden, perhaps build small raised beds to facilitate handling, use ropes as guides for the paths, transforming the labyrinth into an ordered and productive space. The seed in his pocket was the first of many, the promise of an abundant harvest. He imagined his granddaughters running through the garden, picking fruits and herbs, not just for healing, but for daily sustenance, for the joy of living. That place, once a symbol of abandonment and despair, would be transformed by his calloused hands and by his unwavering love. The monk's legacy, who had planted life and hope centuries before, would be continued by a blind grandfather who saw with his heart, building a future for his granddaughters amidst the ruins. He knew the path would be arduous, full of challenges, but the light that now guided his steps was stronger than any darkness, a light that came from love and unbreakable faith. Elias felt the light that guided his steps, a light that came from love and unbreakable faith, warm his soul. Livia and Sophia, now more alert, drank the spring water eagerly, their small bodies absorbing the life it offered. The blind grandfather helped them with tenderness, feeling the improvement with each sip, each stronger breath. Livia's eyes, though still weak, fixed on Elias, and she tried to smile, a gesture that melted the grandfather's heart. Sophia, a little sleepier, nestled against his chest, a familiar warmth that dispelled the cold of the ruins. His granddaughter's recovery was the miracle he had implored for, and now, with the garden discovered, a new phase was beginning. Still kneeling between them, Elias picked up the monk's diary. His fingers, agile and experienced, traced the pages where the embossed drawings of the garden were. He needed to understand the monk's logic, the organization of that space that promised so much. The challenge was immense. How could a blind man cultivate an entire garden? How would he distinguish medicinal herbs from common plants, or edible ones from poisonous ones, without sight? A wave of apprehension washed over him, an internal obstacle that threatened to diminish his newfound hope. But then, he remembered the seed in his pocket, the promise of life, and the monk's wisdom that revealed itself with each touch. He decided to start with the basics. First, the girls needed solid, nutritious food, in addition to the healing water. The diary mentioned fruits of the earth and roots that sustain. Elias focused on the tactile and olfactory descriptions on the pages, searching for plants that could offer immediate sustenance. His fingers found an embossment that seemed to describe a tuberous root, accompanied by a sweet and earthy scent. Beside it, a braille symbol that he interpreted as nutrition and energy. It was a start. With the girls asleep again, more peaceful and with regular breathing, Elias stood up. The seed was still in his pocket, a constant reminder of his purpose. He returned to the garden, the dark passage, now a portal to a world of possibilities. The scent of wet earth and plant life enveloped him again, and he felt the humidity in the air, the softness of the soil beneath his feet. He knelt, letting his hands explore the terrain. He needed a method, a way to map that vast and unknown space. His fingers groped the plants, distinguishing the textures of the leaves, the thickness of the stems, the shape of the flowers. He focused on the aromas, trying to associate them with the diary's descriptions. The monk had left a legacy of sensory wisdom, and Elias was determined to decipher it. He noticed that some plants grew in groups, others isolated. There were climbers that clung to the walls, and shrubs that formed small natural barriers. It was a complex ecosystem, but not chaotic. There was an order, an intelligence in the way everything was arranged. He began to draw a mental map, using the monastery walls as reference points. Every few steps he would stop, extend his arms, feel the breadth of the space, the variations of the soil. He imagined ropes stretched, creating paths and delimiting beds, a structure he could follow safely. The idea of raised beds, which he had pondered, seemed even more crucial now. This would allow him to reach the plants more easily, without constantly bending down, and would organize the space more efficiently. As he explored, his fingers found a plant with large leaves and a robust stem, exactly like the embossment he had deciphered in the diary. The scent was unmistakable, the same sweet and earthy aroma of the root that sustains. Carefully, he began to dig with his hands, feeling the damp earth yield. In a few moments, his fingers touched something firm and rounded. It was a root, large and heavy, exactly as he had imagined. A wave of satisfaction ran through him. He had found the first solid food for his granddaughters. With the root firmly in his hands, Elias felt a new wave of hope. It wasn't just about healing, but about life, about building a future. The monastery, with its secrets and generosity, was revealing itself not just as a refuge, but as a partner in his journey. He knew the work would be exhausting, that there would be moments of doubt and frustration, but the image of Livia and Sophia, strong and healthy, running through that garden, was the driving force that propelled him. He turned, the root in one hand and the diary in the other, ready to return to his granddaughters and share the first harvest of their new home. The light, which had once been merely a promise, now shone with the intensity of a rising sun in his heart. Elias returned to the secret chamber, the sweet and earthy scent of the root in his hands, an aroma of victory. Livia and Sophia, still asleep, seemed more serene. He knelt, set down the root, and groped for the bowl and knife. His experienced fingers scraped the peel, the soft sound filling the silence with a rhythm of care and love. Livia stirred. "Grandpa is here, my love," he whispered. She opened her eyes with a stronger gleam. "Grandpa, good smell," she murmured. Sophia also woke up. Elias smiled. "It's food, my flowers, the first harvest from our garden." With the root cleaned and cut, he brought it to Livia's mouth. She bit into it and her eyes widened. "It's sweet, Grandpa," she said with satisfaction. Sophia also ate. With each piece, energy returned to their small bodies, a healthy blush coloring their cheeks. Elias felt life returning, and an indescribable joy flooded his soul. That moment, simple and profound, was the climax of his journey. It wasn't just the discovery of the garden or the healing, but the sight of them, eating and regaining strength, there, in that sanctuary. It was the materialization of his struggle and faith, while his granddaughters, satisfied and animated, explored the chamber. Elias picked up the diary. His fingers traced the last, unexplored pages, revealing a complex embossment, a map of something greater. The scent of ancient parchment mingled with an aroma of elevated purpose. He deciphered the last symbols. The monk's words spoke of a legacy of light, a beacon for the lost, seeds of hope to be scattered. It described the monastery not as an isolated refuge, but as a center of welcome, where wisdom and generosity would be shared with those who suffered, as Elias and his granddaughters once had. Elias's mind reeled. Had the monk foreseen this? A plan for the monastery to become a sanctuary for more? The idea was grand, frightening. He, blind, a widower with small granddaughters, barely cared for himself, and now he was the guardian of a beacon of hope for others. The weight of responsibility was immense, an emotional obstacle that made him hesitate. Livia, noticing her grandfather's silence, touched his hand. "Grandpa, what is this?" she asked. Elias felt his granddaughter's touch, the trust in her voice, and his doubt dissipated. He was not alone. He had Livia and Sophia, and the monk's legacy. True sight, he remembered, resided in the heart. And his heart now saw a light far beyond the monastery walls, a light he needed to ignite for the world. The climax was not just the healing, but the acceptance of a greater purpose, a mission that would transcend his existence, transforming the monastery into a sanctuary of connection and altruism. He pressed the diary against his chest, feeling the seed in his pocket. It was time to plant, not just in the garden, but in hearts. Elias pressed the diary against his chest, feeling the seed in his pocket vibrate with a new energy. The initial doubt, A cold breath of apprehension receded before the vivid image of Livia and Sophia, their faces asleep and serene, the promise of life pulsing in their small bodies. He was not alone. He had the unwavering love of his granddaughters and the ancestral wisdom of the monk to guide him. True sight, he knew now, did not depend on the eyes, but on the light that radiated from the heart, and his, at that moment, was a rising sun. With a deep sigh, Elias knelt again between the girls. Livia and Sophia, though still weak, were now breathing with a reassuring regularity. He caressed their hair, feeling the softness and warmth that fever had once stolen. Their recovery was the foundation of everything, proof that the miracle was real. Now, he needed to ensure that this new life flourished. The first step was to consolidate the garden. Elias spent the rest of the day and the following morning in the hidden garden, guided by the diary and his sharpened senses. He used the ropes he had found among the monk's supplies to mark out paths, creating an ordered labyrinth he could navigate safely. With his calloused hands, he began to build small raised beds, using loose stones and wood he found in the ruins. It was exhausting work, but every stone lifted, every handful of earth turned, was an act of faith. Livia and Sophia, now stronger, began to follow him. Their hesitant steps became firmer each day. They became his eyes, describing the colors of the flowers, the shape of the leaves, the direction in which the sun shone. "Grandpa, this plant has yellow flowers and smells like honey," exclaimed Livia, while Sophia pointed to the climbers that scaled the walls. Elias listened, felt, and with each description, his mental map of the garden became more complete, more vibrant. He taught them to identify herbs by touch and smell, transforming learning into a game of discovery. The connection between them deepened, weaving a network of love and mutual dependence. Each day, more edible roots and medicinal herbs were harvested. The spring water, always fresh and pure, continued to nourish their bodies. The girls regained the sparkle in their eyes, the laughter on their lips, and the energy to explore every corner of that sanctuary. The monastery was no longer a place of fear, but a home of abundance and joy. The idea of a beacon for the lost still echoed in Elias's mind. He knew he couldn't simply wait for people to find it. He would need to prepare the monastery, not just for sustenance, but for welcoming others. He began to organize the monks' supplies, to clean and tidy other chambers, imagining the day when others, as desperate as he once was, would find refuge there. He didn't know how the monastery would become known, but he trusted that just as the secret passage revealed itself to him, the path for others would also be unveiled. Elias's greatest conflict, his blindness, had transformed into his greatest strength. He saw with his heart, with his hands, with his ears, and now with the eyes of his granddaughters. Overcoming was not just about surviving, but flourishing, and not just for himself, but for the world. The monastery, once a labyrinth of cold stones, was now a living testament to love, resilience, and the human capacity to ignite light where there had only been darkness. The conflicts had been resolved, not with an end, but with a new and glorious beginning. Days turned into weeks, and weeks into months, weaving a tapestry of life and hope in the ruins of the ancient monastery. Elias, guided by unwavering faith and the love of his granddaughters, transformed the stone labyrinth into a vibrant refuge. The secret garden, once a hidden treasure, flourished under his care, with Livia and Sophia as his eyes and little helpers. They ran through the raised beds their grandfather had built, their laughter echoing among the ancient walls, identifying herbs by scent and fruits by texture, with the dexterity that only practice and love could teach. The spring water continued to flow, pure and healing, and the monk's diary became Elias's guide, not just for plants, but for life. The last pages, those that spoke of the legacy of light and the beacon for the lost, were now his compass. He felt that the monastery had a greater purpose, a calling that went beyond his small family. And the call was answered. The first to arrive was a young mother, exhausted and hungry, with a baby in her arms, lost and without hope. She had heard whispers of a place of peace, a refuge amidst desolation. Elias, with the help of his granddaughters, welcomed her with the same tenderness he had dedicated to his own girls. Livia and Sophia, now strong and full of life, shared their food and warmth, their eyes shining with the joy of helping. The young mother, seeing Elias's serenity and the children's vitality, felt the flame of hope rekindle in her own heart. In time, others arrived. Homeless families, lonely elders, lost souls whom life had mistreated. The monastery, under Elias's silent leadership, became a true sanctuary. Each brought their own story of pain, but found there a balm for the soul. Elias, who did not see with his eyes, saw the need in every voice, the anguish in every gesture, and offered not only food and shelter, but listening and compassion. Tasks were divided. Some helped in the garden, learning from Elias the wisdom of herbs and fruits. Others cared for the chambers, restoring what they could, transforming the ruins into a communal home. The children played together, their voices filling the air with a melody of innocence and joy, a sound Elias cherished as his greatest treasure. Livia and Sophia, with their contagious energy, were the little ambassadors of hope, showing everyone that life could flourish even in the most improbable places. Elias, sitting on a stone bench, felt the sun on his face and the hum of life around him. His fingers, once trembling with despair, were now firm and experienced, capable of identifying every plant, every approaching face. He had taught everyone that true sight was not limited to the eyes, but resided in the ability to feel, to touch, to hear the heart of another. The monastery, once a symbol of abandonment, was now a beacon of light, a living testament that even in the deepest darkness, love, faith, and human connection can ignite the brightest of hopes. Elias, the blind grandfather, had fulfilled the monk's legacy, planting seeds of altruism and resilience that would flourish for generations, an eternal garden of light in the heart of the world. The eternal garden of light, planted in the heart of the world by Elias, flourished with a vitality that transcended the seasons. The monastery ruins, once silent and forgotten, now pulsed with the life of a united community, a mosaic of souls who found there not only shelter, but a new purpose. Elias, sitting on his favorite stone bench, felt the warmth of the sun on his face and the harmonious hum that surrounded him. His ears, sharper than ever, caught the laughter of children playing in the courtyard, the soft sound of the spring water, the murmur of conversations, and the song of a young mother cradling her baby. Livia and Sophia, now with faces flushed with health and eyes full of curiosity, were the little guardians of the garden. They knew every plant, every herb, every fruit, guided by their grandfather's teachings and the wisdom of the monk's diary. "Grandpa, the raspberries are ripe!" exclaimed Livia, bringing him a handful of fruits. Sophia, with a larger basket, offered him aromatic herbs, identifying them by scent. Elias smiled, feeling the touch of their small hands and the sweetness of the fruits. Their sight was his own, and the love that united them was the force that moved that place. The community grew, but not without its challenges. The arrival of new families brought with it different temperaments, fears, and habits. There were moments of apprehension, of small discussions about the division of tasks or the use of resources. But Elias, with his unwavering calm and his ability to see beyond words, always found a path to harmony. He listened to everyone with patience, his calloused hands gesturing gently as he uttered words of wisdom, reminding them of the journey that had led them there and the value of compassion. Once, an elderly man, with a closed demeanor and a heart hardened by losses, arrived at the monastery. He kept to himself, suspicious, refusing to participate in tasks or share his stories. The community, accustomed to unity, felt the tension. Elias, perceiving the hidden pain beneath the armor of silence, asked Livia and Sophia to bring the man a bowl of fresh fruits from the garden. The girls, without fear, approached him. "Grandpa Elias said these raspberries are the sweetest, sir," Livia said, extending the bowl. The man, surprised by the kindness, hesitated, but the children's pure gaze and the sweet scent of the fruits made him accept. That day, he ate in silence, but the next day, he was seen helping in the garden, his hands, once idle, now planting seeds alongside Sophia. The monastery was not just a refuge, it was a school of life. Elias taught everyone the importance of caring for the earth, respecting nature, sharing what they had, and finding beauty in every small gesture. He showed that true wealth was not in gold, but in human connection, in overcoming adversity, and in the ability to light a path for others. The monastery chambers, once cold and empty, were transformed into cozy dwellings, with makeshift beds and the warmth of fires lit in restored fireplaces. The children ran freely, their games echoing the joy of a rediscovered childhood. Elias felt that the monk's legacy was being fulfilled and expanded. The monastery was a beacon, yes, but also a safe harbor, where wounded souls found healing and a new meaning for existence. He knew that life would always bring new challenges, but the unwavering faith that had guided him from the abyss of despair to that garden of light was now shared by all. Elias's blindness had become everyone's vision, a vision that saw humanity in its purest essence and that transformed fear into hope, loneliness into community, and darkness into an eternal dawn. He was the guardian of a miracle, a grandfather who, with his heart, had built a home for the world.